Hi everyone, welcome to today's session where we talk about ICT governance with Mr. Revelation Nyorongo. My name is Nosentia Ndebera. I'm your host today. As an advocate for women in tech, um, a founder for Women in Tech Malawi, a lead for Shipod Africa Lilongwe, and also an ambassador for Women Tech Makers. I am so excited to have all of you here and also to just hear more about ICT governance from our guest today. I really do hope that you're going to enjoy the session, and please drop your questions once you have something to say, and we're going to address them later. Here with me, I have Revelation, who is a DevOps engineer, and he's going to share more on transformative impact of the AWS framework in driving digital innovation and governance across East and Southern Africa. So, yeah, without further ado, let me just hand it over to Revelation, and please do explain to us or just introduce yourself further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Innocencia, and everyone who has joined. I'm glad to be here tonight to explain some tips and my thoughts on ICT governance, leveraging on my experience in my activities as a DevOps engineer at Ubuntu Net Alliance. So just a quick introduction, as Innocencia has mentioned. My name is Revelation. I am the DevOps engineer for Ubuntu Net Alliance for Research and Education Networking for East and Southern African region, NRENS. I know that could be a mouthful, but it basically means I work for an organization that is bringing together a group of countries of about 22 in East and Southern Africa who have formed what are known as NRENs. Some of you might know them. These are National Research and Education Networks. For Malawi, we do have MARIN, is Malawi Research and Education Network. And for various countries, we have different NRENs as well. And tonight, I'm particularly honored to talk on my experience working within the region, as well as just to highlight some of the key observations that I've been able to make and how this has been an eye-opener for both private and public institutions that if they would implement this, they would be able to excel forward. So I have a presentation that I would like to put up. So yeah, I hope you can see my presentation. So basically, that's what we're going to talk about today. Quickly, like I mentioned, I introduced myself already, but what I would like to get across is that I have worked as a M-Health and data warehousing specialist at Partners in Health. Most of you might know it as PIH or Abwenzipa za Umoyo, that's in Malawi. And I have developed DHIS2 applications. DHIS2 is a system, it's a health system based that is used almost worldwide. And there were so many experiences and key lessons that I had taken from developing such a platform and going further to adapt it towards other health unrelated fields like agriculture and religious institutions like producing um, a whole adaptation framework for integration of different applications that have been tailor-made for a particular field and transforming them into key systems in a very different field. And just a little bit more about the UbuntuNet Alliance. So it operates a high-speed internet connectivity for research and education institutions in East and Southern Africa. So we do provide, sorry, so we do provide high-speed internet connectivity to these NRENs, who in turn they provide to their subsequent users, who are universities, research institutions, and any schools that have subscribed to usage of this high-speed internet. So we just provide what is known as a backbone, most of you might know, and then the NRENs themselves are responsible for laying out of fiber to connect the colleges, universities, and schools and research institutions. That is the core business of UbuntuNet Alliance. However, the Alliance does also provide, as written in its mission, to provide, to ensure advocacy for innovative ICT tools within the region. And this includes provision and operation of some advanced innovative tools like eduroam. Most of you may have used eduroam before. eduroam is a high-speed internet um, internet connectivity system. If I can call it. So a researcher from Malawi can connect to a Wi-Fi in at Heathrow Airport or something for free, and using their credentials that they have from, say, University of Malawi or MOBAS or MAST. So that makes it very seamless for such researchers and students to roam around and be able to access such connectivity timely, so they can contribute to the research community. So this makes it easy even for those, even for staff. So the eduroam service has been particularly perfected in Europe. It was perfected in Europe and then brought in Africa. And what the UbuntuNet Alliance does is to ensure that there are more countries that are adopting this eduroam, and advocacy for such innovative tools is being implemented. And also, there we do operate what is known as eduid.africa. This is an identity and access management service that is provided on a continental level. So this is operated jointly by the West African similar regional body, that is WACREN, West African Research and Education Network. So what this service does is to offer a way to authenticate users to access resources in the research and education community. For instance, if a student right now would like to access, say, a book in a particular library in, say, in South Africa, they, using this particular tool, they shouldn't have to create another set of credentials and then access that particular system. So what they would have to do is to pretty much use the set of credentials that they have created at their institution, and then just log in into that system seamlessly. So you can see that all these tools are being made available by the Ubuntu Net Alliance, advocating for adoption of all these tools so that we improve the region's digital infrastructure as well as uh, digital adoption. So just a quick advisory. Most of the sentiments that I'm going to mention in this webinar tonight are not a reflection of the Ubuntu Net Alliance or any organization that I may mention through it. And it does not provide any guarantee for the views of the alliance itself. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So quickly, I would like to talk about ICT governance itself. So I quickly conjured up a definition of ICT governance, but I figured this couldn't well resonate with most of the viewers. So what I had thought just now is to uh, liken it to a household. Say, in imagine we are in a house and we have all these appliances, and then we do have perhaps a biometric door, for instance. And so what we are saying is to define who gets to use what and who gets to use it at what time. How long are they supposed to use that microwave? How long are they supposed to use the TV? And are they using the TVs correctly, or are they using the fridge correctly? So pretty much ICT governance boils down to such an approach where we are saying in this particular organization, the IT infrastructure that we have, who is supposed to use this and how are they using this infrastructure, and to what extent are they supposed to use this particular infrastructure. For instance, an organization might have 20 laptops, and usage of those laptops might be improper because you haven't defined how, who, and what are they supposed to use a particular laptop for. So I've pretty much boiled it down to a very basic definition of ICT governance, but it goes beyond that as it scales out to even larger corporations that have to clearly define what their infrastructure, how and what their infrastructure is supposed to do to serve the goals of their business. So some of the importance of ICT governance includes to align strategies with business goals, like I mentioned, like optimize resource allocation, manage the risks effectively, and enhance transparency and accountability. So all the tools that I had mentioned earlier, they are driving digital transformation through within the region in East and Southern Africa. And most of these tools and digital activities are improving public service and transparency. They are enabling better management of data and decision making. And they are promoting improved health outcomes for patients. I'll cite an example for Partners in Health, where I was working a couple of years ago, where we implemented what was known as community health mobile toolkit. So this mobile toolkit, what it did was to collect data and then produce meaningful insights into the health of the population. I remember one project that we had worked on pretty much summed up some key insights that led to introduction of new interventions that served the people of Neno, the southern region of Malawi's district that is very hard to reach. So we had implemented this project and had written a couple of machine learning code that had aggregated the information that we had passed through it and provided us with key insights and uh, how we can forge ahead to implement a project that improves the outcomes, the health outcomes of the population of Nino. So, what are some of the challenges in ICT governance in East and Southern Africa? I would like to quote uh, a, a story. Not sure how correct this story is, but I've read it through some references I was going through a couple of weeks ago. The Cobra effect. I would like to ask you what you would do in this particular scenario. If you was the authority in this scenario, what you would do. And you could respond to that through comments and whatsoever. But here's the Cobra effect. Most of economists would know what the Cobra effect is. So in the 19th century thereabouts, when Britain colonized India, in Delhi there was a large population of cobras, and so what the British government did was to incentivize by putting out to people to say everyone who brings a dead cobra would be rewarded monetary wise. And so the goal was to eliminate or to reduce the population of cobras because because of whatever reasons that was there. And so what happened was there were people who were breeding the cobras themselves. So they would breed the cobras and then kill the cobras and submit them to the authorities and get their paycheck. And this kept on going. So the government had wondered as to how it was possible to suddenly get a large number of cobras being killed, but then the population of cobras was relatively not being affected. So after they found out that people were actually breeding the cobras to make a couple of money for themselves, they had to discontinue the program. After they discontinued the program, guess what happened? Those who were breeding the cobras got frustrated that the cobras that they were breeding, they were no longer of use. So they had to let loose of the cobras into the city, and now there was even more problem of cobras. The population was very high. What am I driving at? ICT governance is one tool that is effective in driving digitalization within the region. However, if not properly approached, it may lead to costly implications and it may not provide the solution that we are looking for, just like the government of Britain did not get the solution in their target to reduce the population of the cobras in Delhi. So, what are some of the challenges that are affecting ICT governance implementation in East and Southern Africa? One, Um, these challenges are cross sectional in health, in research and education, even in small businesses. There are vast amounts of challenges that exist. For instance, in in the health sector, there is a huge gap in which the the health sector the health sector is trying to close to improve its ICT governance. As of recent, there has been some quite good developments in Malawi. The formalization and implementation, operationalization rather, of the digital health division that pretty much governs all the digital health implementation plans, as well as some huge advancements, like I mentioned, in research and education itself. And we are to see even more adoption of good ICT governance frameworks within private sectors, various private sectors. But what we lack in most of the African countries is that we consume a lot of tech output from outside Africa. And therefore, what we are doing is to remain as developing countries. So someone asked a question to say, when we say developing countries and developed countries, what do we actually mean? Because when we say developing countries, what we are trying to say is that these countries haven't been innovative enough to reach a level that the developed countries have reached. And so these countries are playing catch up towards what other nations have been able to achieve. And so that sparked a thought to say, what if we achieve some of these goals in our own way, such that we are no longer developing nations? We are nations that are developed, but the definition of developed nation is the one that we have. And so this draws into the approach in which we are innovative and in which we are using the ICT tools that are before us, and the bold step to actually embrace and encourage innovation in ICT itself. So ICT governance would be properly implemented if there was some good awareness among the people and the understanding of ICT governance frameworks. I would quote some of the incidents that I've faced personally. I was invited to respond to an ICT incident, a cybersecurity incident rather, in Mozambique. However, I'll not mention the organization that had called for my services. This was on the outside my professional field, um, my 7 to 5 job. So I had received a query to resolve some issue, but then when I asked to take a look at their disaster recovery plan or cybersecurity response plan, or to talk to their cybersecurity response team, they did not provide any of that, and that they did not know what that was. And so when I helped them through the challenge that they had, it was pretty minimal, really. Like I wasn't even supposed to be there because the person that we had worked with was in a good place to solve the particular problem that they were facing, and it wasn't that big as they might have thought. Anyway, but that's besides the point. That knowledge of uh, ICT governance and the frameworks of ICT governance themselves is very important to implementation of the ICT governance. So this organization, if they had all these documents in place, if they had policies around data management, if they had policies around um, policies and plans around disaster recovery and cybersecurity policies, they would have been able to respond strategically to some incidences like these. And so what we had to do is to develop these policies for them and to structure some put in place some documents that would guide them on how to respond to what, who gets to use what, and how are they supposed to use it, and to what extent are they supposed to use these tools. Like I mentioned previously, Africa is consuming a lot of tech from outside, which is being which is not very progressive, if I do say so myself. We we need nations to develop in-house systems and a way of responding to cybersecurity threats and how being able to build strong and responsive CSATs. So CSATs is cybersecurity response um, team. We need to build such teams within the region that would be able to collectively share knowledge and respond to cybersecurity threats. And we've seen a tremendous progress in as far as Africa is trying to push for governance, ICT governance implementation. We've seen the SADC nations imposing regulations to say we need all the health data to be kept within the nation and not on servers outside Africa or outside their nation, which is in a way a huge leap, as we all know, most nations are not capable of powering their own data centers. They are not capable to keep a server running for 24/7. There's a lot of downtime, load shedding, and therefore this presents opens up a whole can of worms, if I do say so myself, to say if we want to house our own data within our nations, how are we going to respond to issues of stability, issues of availability of systems? Okay, so all these are some of the issues that the nations are trying to look at, but with a proper approach, I believe we should be able to house all our data within the nation and provide proper jurisdiction on the data that we are serving. Because as you may have noticed within the region, there has been some instances where some data violation or data privacy incidences have happened, and nations or governments are not able to act on a particular set of uh, service provider because their data is not inside the country, and therefore the country that only has jurisdiction over that particular data is the one that is hosting it. So this particular approach to ICT governance implementation in Eastern Southern Africa is a very welcome move, and I believe we should be able to see more activities along that. And pretty much we've seen more resistance to change when it comes to implementation of ICT governance, particularly in very bureaucratic setups, especially the government itself. So most most people do not see, most officials do not see the importance of establishing ICT governance frameworks in an organization. And so what they would do is to subcontract a vendor to provide some ICT related service. And when that vendor says provides that vendor has for one reason or the other is has conducted a foul play, they wouldn't be able to know, or they wouldn't be able to deal with that particular situation as effectively as they would if they had ICT governance framework in place. And so we can cite so many examples, some of which are that we have noticed in Malawi itself a couple of months ago, where our passport issuing system was compromised in a way that required us to um, activate disaster recovery response plan. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't mention much details on that because the system is now up and running. It has been recovered, which is a very good move. But imagine if the immigration department did not have any plan towards that. It would have been very difficult for them to recover the system and to map the way forward. And so this is to encourage most of the organizations and even ICT leaders that we have in this building, sorry, in on this call, to advocate for adoption of ICT governance within their organization. And some of the questions that one would ask is to say, do we have any document that spells out the data management usage, something like that? Or do we have a policy around usage of ICT equipment? Just basically a document that would spell out how or who has some level of access to a particular system is one document that would take the organization a long way into achieving its goals. And there are so many ways through which we can find some opportunities to implement ICT governance within the region. So some of which are standardization of ICT practices across industries. So governments, private sectors, they need to know that implementation of ICT governance is not only for IT related institutions, it is for every organization that is connected to the internet, or that is that is using electronic equipment that processes data itself. And that's pretty much it on that. Here's are some of the tips to implement ICT governance. So basically, you would have to choose a framework that fits your organization and size and the needs as well. So you look at it from the point of gathering support from management, that is to lobby the management to provide, let's say a pitch to management on the importance of having an ICT governance framework within the organization. And then you'd demonstrate to them by assessing your current ICT governance maturity, and then you'd look at what what you currently have, and you could even make simulations of what if our CEO is not able to access his emails, or what if some intruder gets into my our finance department's emails, and we are not able to access the emails, or they are now sending emails impersonating the finance admin team itself. So those are some of the questions that you can ask to set up an ICT governance policy framework rather, and you would go as far as identifying gaps and prioritizing improvements, and then develop a phased implementation plan. You would agree with me that in Africa, in Malawi rather, and pretty much in Africa, we do not have a huge number of a huge team of IT staff. And what that does is to force most IT professionals to assume so many roles. And those roles would include um, one person becoming the systems engineer, one person becoming the developer, the same person being the hardware technician, the same person being the the um, there's ICT officer, really, like support officer, just like that. So having that particular situation in Africa puts us at a very a disadvantaged position. But from an opportunist point of view, that provides us with a huge opportunity to implement the ideas that we know would improve attainability of the goals of the organization themselves. How do we do this? By advocating for adoption of ICT governance frameworks. So you would say, if you are the lead person of IT at your organization, what you'd advocate for is establishment of the documents that I had mentioned earlier. You draft up some regulations, you draft up some policies around data management, uh, cybersecurity response, and what have you. And it always seems not important until you need these documents. Trust me. And as the saying goes, it's good for you to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So it's very important for you to get these documents in place for your organization, and not just get them, and see to it that they are implemented. If they are password policies, they are well implemented. If there's access policies, they are well implemented. If there are vendor management policies that you have put in place, they are well implemented as well, and not just get every Jim and Jack that you see freelancing on the streets to have access to your systems and institutions to provide a particular service. And quickly, I would like to jump right into the examples of AWS framework agreement that I had led into implementation within the region of Eastern Southern Africa. So the framework agreement spells out pretty much what uh, the institutions within East and Southern Africa can consume on AWS. So we this framework agreement was initiated by the Ubuntu Net Alliance um, to through the service provider called Reddington. And what this agreement does is to basically provide aggregate aggregate usage of AWS services within the region, and then advocating for a reduced or discounted price to access such services. And like you may have, as you may recall what I mentioned earlier, that there's an approach to for most SADC countries to have their data residing in country, and therefore AWS Framework Agreement is also pushing for establishment of regional and country level data centers by AWS itself, so that nations or organizations within nations can easily and quickly adopt the policy that has been, the policy that has been passed by SADC to have data hosted in country. And this framework agreement would allow NRENs, that's National Research and Education institutions within the nations and their member institutions, to gain access to AWS data waivers. So for most data engineers, network engineers, they know how costly it is to transfer data from, to transmit data from one place to the other. And therefore, what the framework agreement does is to waiver the charges that are associated with sending and receiving of data. This in turn would mean more applications being developed within the region and more applications being adopted, and therefore reduced consumption of foreign technology. Okay, so we all know that AWS provides a comprehensive suite of services. We have infrastructure as a service. So we are looking at a virtual computer, a virtual machine, if some may look at it that way. A virtual machine running on Ubuntu. They can install their website on it and then run the website on that particular machine itself. Platform as a service, software as a service, function as a service, and many more. So the key framework agreement objectives for establishing this particular framework was to streamline the procurement process itself. So this first of its kind framework agreement within the region, East and Southern African region, is looking beyond just consumption of these AWS services. So what this framework would do is to provide a template, like I mentioned earlier, that ICT governance requires you to standardize across sectors a way in which ICT resources can be consumed and used. And so the AWS Framework Agreement was established to provide an enhanced collaboration and streamline the procurement process itself for AWS cloud services, and provide a structured framework for efficient utilization of the cloud services. So we did this at Ubuntu Net Alliance to promote digitalization of East and Southern African institutions and to make available professional services, innovative services provided by a vendor like AWS, and to ensure that we 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 do the heavy lifting for most organizations. So organizations wouldn't have to worry about the security issues surrounding the data integrity in AWS and what have you. That's it from me. Thank you very much. But before I go, I would like to just quickly mention the challenges that we had faced when we were trying to broker this AWS framework agreement within East and Southern Africa. So you would know, you would agree with me that dealing with an enterprise like AWS, who are profit oriented, is somehow tricky in a way that uh, they would want to make profit, but establishing the agreement itself would see to it that they are not making too much profit or way too rocket high profits out of the institutions that want to consume these services. And therefore, it was a rigorous process itself, if I do say so myself, to identify a vendor and then negotiate these terms and discuss and document to the bitter end on what what to expect from the consumers of this framework agreement itself, and just to do a permutation of event outcomes given various situations within given the dynamic environment that we have within East and Southern Africa, within the nations themselves. So that's pretty much it from me. Uh, if there are any questions, I would like to open the floor or push it back to Innocencia. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Revision, for that wonderful presentation. It was very, very insightful. I've personally learned a lot. But I do have two questions. The first one is, what is the most surprising challenge that you faced during your implementation? Like this one, you just did not see it coming, and yeah, what was the lesson that you learned from it?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. That's a very good question. So apparently, the most there were a couple of surprising challenges that we had faced, some of which being players from the different players in cloud services provision, not allowing, not welcoming this particular approach in uh, consuming of AWS services. So like I mentioned, AWS is profit oriented, and there are other profit oriented individuals or organizations that are providing similar services within the region. And therefore, what this meant to them was a threat to their to their to their business goals, and what that meant for establishment of this particular framework agreement was uh, a poor buy-in within for members that were procuring this agreement for, which faced some reasonable downtime, some delays that did not provide room for us to achieve this framework agreement in time as we had previously projected. So, to sum up, I would say bureaucracy around institutions was one of the key issues, and basic, I can say, trade, financial, or um, business ethics or activities, if I should say so myself, was one of the key um, highlights that we never expected would be of huge impact to establishment of the agreement itself.
All right. So there's a question here from Phyllis. Let me just show it.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Phyllis, for asking that question. Phyllis says, what's your opinion on how far digital transformation is in Malawi, and if you know any we should expect in future when it comes to Malawi? Yeah, that's a very good expectation, a question rather. So I know a couple of digital transformation activities that are going on, and uh, they are spearheaded by key people within the government itself. Talk of the Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority itself, It is pushing for various activities that we've we've seen and we've known, and some of the transformation activities that we've seen so far haven't, like a couple of years back, haven't been as fruitful, considering the approach that it was taken. Like I mentioned, Malawi is part of the countries that is pretty much consuming foreign technologies, and therefore some of the activities that were being implemented previously were pretty much a copy and paste to try to achieve the same results that have been achieved in different countries. But of recent, we've seen the various activities implemented by government itself in Malawi to champion access to information, connectivity to the internet itself, so that more people have access to internet and more people have access to information they can that they can make decisions on and run their organizations on such data. And to answer the first part of the question, that is how far digital transformation has gone in Malawi, I would say there is still much room for improvement, considering where we are so far. And this is not only for Malawi, but it's for Africa as a whole. For instance, I would cite some examples the from the mobile operators. For instance, we currently do not have any mobile operator that has a public API that you can easily consume and interact with uh, to build, a a financial application, for instance. It is very difficult for it is very difficult and not open for young people or developers to easily develop some innovative mobile-based applications, or integrate mobile-based applications into the application, because most of the application programming interface of organizations, not only mobile operators, really, organizations, you talk of mobile operators, banks, and what have you, they are quite closed and they are not well documented. And so what happens is they up this approach stifles innovative abilities of most young people who are trying to develop um, digital tools within the nation. So there's another question here that says, how can organizations ensure they are effectively measuring impact and success of their digital transformation initiatives? That's a very good question also. Pretty much would have to an organization needs to go back to its basics. So like I mentioned earlier, that establishment of an ICT governance framework is very important for any organization and every organization. And one way to do that is to ensure that you establish your level of maturity towards ICT governance. So this includes asking questions like, what what do we have in place so far, and who is able to access what to within the organization, and what what does it mean when we say um, we want to invite someone to build, pretty much, let's say, a website for us. So you'd have to assess all those and determine all those points, and even go as far as to ask questions as to say, how many processes within the organization are dependent on technology itself. And when you answer that question, you go as far as to identify which points of failure do exist within this particular process. And you go as further as asking what goal are we trying to achieve in business wise, for the organization through this particular process that depends on this IT um, IT backed process. And so when you establish and answer those questions plus many others, what you would do is to set up, is to envision who accesses, who is involved in that particular process itself, how much level of access do they have, and how long are they supposed to use it, and what is the desired outcome that they supposed to have. And when you establish that, what that provides you is a two-way monitoring point. One, you would have to monitor the user's activities and monitor that is outside the system itself. So you'd have to set up a way of monitoring outside the system to monitor the process itself, and then you monitor the system itself. So you are talking of setting up monitoring tools for the system, and then setting up monitoring tools for the for the process itself. For instance, you would choose to implement um, a, a check, uh, a particular feature that connects to your database to check the level of access to a particular product, a particular feature within the process itself, and then have set up like a monthly report that is automatically generated and sent to your email or to a group of emails that can look at it and then identify any flags that exist within the system. Yeah. Is there any other question? Okay, I do not see any other question. So I'll just wait on Innocencia to jump right in. While I wait on Innocencia, I would also add to say measuring impact can be quite tricky, as there's there could be politics at play in terms of uh, people who are not well informed of ICT governance frameworks, and just to encourage any players out there to tread carefully on how to measure impact um, to avoid letting bureaucracy in the way and uh, stifle the process, as well as the politics that play through adoption of ICT policies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Revelation, for sharing with us your valuable insights. Well, your expertise on the AWS framework and its impact on digital transformation has been incredibly enlightening. So we really appreciate on behalf of the viewers and also those that are going to watch the recording later. We really appreciate, and yeah, thank you very much for being with us today. And I hope you're going to be open to us if we have more questions later. Maybe we could come to you and ask you, say on LinkedIn or anywhere else that you would be very comfortable. Yeah, and if anyone is interested in learning more about the AWS or digital transformation, feel free to reach out to me or, well, Revolution here is the expert. And also be sure to follow him on LinkedIn for more of these. And also stay tuned for more content and discussion on similar topics. We'll be sharing the recording of today's session on our YouTube channel. So check it out if you missed any part of it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also like our uh, social media handles. And yeah, we hope to see you again next time. Bye everyone. Have a good night.